Purpose Highway is a space for discussions that drive connections toward people's highest purpose to build a better self and a better world. Join me for season 1, where I start to uncover stories of entrepreneurs and thinkers that are making an impact. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and enjoy today's episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Scott Mason's Purpose Highway. Sitting next to me in the front seat, revving to go, is Monica Palacios. Monica is an international hip chick. She is a writer and performer. She does solo shows, plays, screenplays, short stories, stand-up comedy featuring the Latinx LGBTQ experience. Her historical importance is such that the city of Los Angeles itself honored her for her many years as an Latinx LGBTQ trailblazer twice. Once in 2017, and then in October, specifically October 12th, 2012, Monica was formally recognized by having the city of LA name that day Monica Palacios Day. Now, I have to say, so far on this podcast, we have had some pretty amazing people, but I have never had someone who has had an entire day named after them. Welcome to the show, Monica. It is an honor to have you.
Thank you so much. I really have been looking forward to this day, so I'm excited.
Thank you. So we spent some time getting to know each other a little bit before the show and having some back and forth with some pre-interview questions. And one of the things that you said during that process really struck with me. You said that you have a passion for creating art that matters to the people that you represent. So maybe to start with, I wanted to ask you, what is art to you that matters?
Boy, that is a big question. I think for me, something has to really spark my attention. When I create work because either I'm pissed off or something really cracks me up, or I just want to give voice to the voiceless. And I think pretty much those are my underlying foundational points when I look at art myself, but when I create my own art. Yeah.
And one other thing that was embedded in that remark that I thought was really interesting, you said that you're not only interested in creating art that matters, but matters to the people that I represent. Is that art about those people, for those people, some combination of both? And talk to me a little bit about who the folks are that you represent.
I'm going to say definitely it's a combination, being for the people and about the people. And by people, I mean LGBTQ, Latino, Latinx people who have definitely been on the margins as far as art is concerned, and who we see in television, and who we see in film. I mean, my goodness, right now, I don't think there's any show that is on television right now, January 2021, that's featuring a Latinx person, the lead character. I don't think so. And so that's important to me, that I have the power to create work, the script that will, get other people work. I mean, that's super important to me. I want to be successful as an individual, but I want to open doors for others. That to me is, true success, so that I continue to open doors for others, because that matters to me, definitely.
Talk to me a little bit about your background and your life. What led you to have such a commitment to this particular passion?
Originally I start from, I was born into a very performative family. Everybody either played an instrument or did some type of sketch work at school. My dad was a self-taught musician. And so there was always that performative element. My older brother was in a few bands. So there was rehearsal going on in our garage. So I saw that as a young person, and I liked that. I would see my parents entertaining at home. They would sing songs. My dad played his guitar. He would sing songs. My mom would join him. And since my dad taught me how to play the ukulele, I would join in. And I was the 10-year-old singing songs and playing an instrument with my dad and my mom. And I liked it. It was cool. I understood it. People who came to our house, mostly relatives, they enjoyed that. And so that whole performative, bug was in me from the very beginning. So on top of that, everybody in my family is funny. And as a child, I see people sharing laughter, sharing jokes. We watch sitcoms, we watch variety shows on television together. And I'm really understanding that. I'm understanding how a joke works, the whole purpose of laughing, and how that really brings, it brings a release to in a moment, but also in one's life. And I continue with this feeling and sensations, and I go into, by the time I get into high school, I go to an all-girl Catholic high school, and unbeknownst to me, this was really my area where I start to understand that I am a performer. I am funny. I have a lot of power doing this, and I'm going to continue to do it. And actually, I do a stand-up comedy routine for an English class, and that really strikes me. And I get it. I really understand that. And I know that someday, I'm only 16 at this time, but I know that someday I'm going to go.
Wow.
I'm going to go on stage and I'm going to start performing. And as far as the mattering part, it's not until I come to San Francisco and I perform at the Valencia Rose Cafe, the first all-queer stand-up comedy location in the nation in the early 80s. That's where I start to understand, this stand-up comedy, this is bigger than me. I'm doing it for myself, but people are really appreciating that I am on stage. I'm Chicana, I'm queer, I'm lesbian, and I'm talking about all my identities, and I'm making a really big connection with the audience. And that's when it really comes together, and I understand the importance of, this is not just about me. This goes beyond me. This is really political. The fact that I'm just standing on stage talking about my life, this is really important. And the fact that I would have people after the shows come up to me and tell me the importance. How they felt very proud of me, and that I'm shining a light on them as well. So that's really when it comes together, when I start performing at the Valencia Rose.
There is so much to unpack in what you just said that I'm gonna have a few follow-up questions, which will force us to talk about the Valencia Rose in a few minutes. But are we going to talk about the Valencia Rose when we get there? Yes, we are. So let me just ask one question that the audience will need to know, or at least this particular member of the audience will need to know. Do you still play the ukulele?
I don't have one on me, but I could play the ukulele. My dog has fleas. Just really basic little notes. And I do have a guitar right now that I'm really trying to get a hold of and learn how to play. But there's just so much going on. It's just hard to kind of sit down and play that guitar. And also, too, your fingertips. I don't know if anybody out there, when you start playing the guitar, your fingertips get really sore. So it's just a matter of, do I want to have really sore fingertips?
So talk to us a little bit about what your family was like. Where did you grow up? What sort of neighborhood did you grow up in? What was the general vibe of your family? And what was it like being that girl that had a sense of humor and had a family that was the performative family when you were in Catholic school? I mean, that could not have been anything other than a unique experience. And you're laughing, so I suspect I'm right.
I grew up in the town of San Jose, that is now part of Silicon Valley, which it was not back in the early 60s. It was just a bunch of orchards, apricot, walnut, what else? Plums, just really lots of land. And my parents, we were living probably in an area called Sal Si Puedes, a barrio called Sal Si Puedes, which means get out if you can, which isn't very encouraging. And then by the time I got into second grade, we moved 2.5 miles away to a better neighborhood, into the Storybook Homes. And here, these houses, this is 66, the houses were on streets called, they had a storybook theme. So the streets were called Cottontail Lane, Bambi Lane, Peter Pan Avenue, and my street was Cinderella Lane, Scott, Cinderella. And people would.
And could you relate?
Oh my God! This is the thing that just killed me. They would ask me for my address, and I would say 2061 Cinderella Lane, and they would always reply, "Oh, does that mean you have to be home by midnight, or you'll turn into a pumpkin?"
Were you ever like, Mom and Dad, could we move to a different street, please?
Yeah, it was just really interesting. So, my family, it was. I had a fun household. It was very loving. We got paid attention to. I pretty much did whatever I wanted. I guess I didn't really know I was queer at the time. Mm-hmm. But I would dress, like some days I would dress like a girl, some days I would dress like a boy. And my mom didn't say a word. My dad didn't say anything. And I mean, just playfully, I didn't really go into great detail, but just the fact that I could wear boy clothes. Yeah. And it wasn't a big deal, or I could wear a dress and it wasn't a big deal. So, that was cool. That was cool that I was just, I was very artistic as a child. And then again, there was always that performative aspect to it. And, but this is now, so we're now late 60s. So the elementary schools, the public schools that I was going to, they're pretty intense. A lot of racial fights were happening pretty much daily. I saw a vice principal and a fifth grader who they're pretty much the same size. I saw them beat up on each other, and I had like an adult beating up on a student, but it was crazy. It was crazy. And so my fourth grade teacher tells my parents, you know what, get your daughter out of here. Get your daughter into a private school immediately. She's wasting her time here. And so my parents took that advice, and they, along with 2 other families who were going to the same school, and also we were going to the same parish, decided to up in their kids from the public schools and take them to the private school, which was St. Patrick's Elementary School, and that was downtown San Jose. So it was a big deal. It was a big deal to go from public school and then private school as a 5th grader. Yeah. That was a real big change, and I really hated it at first. But then I really got into it because I was given a lot of attention. And then from there, I went to a private Catholic girls' school, which I did not want to go to, but it was too bad because my 2 older sisters had already gone there. So I had no choice. And so it was hard for me to go into the private high school because I heard there were lesbians. And
oh my God. But I'm horrified.
But about 4 months later, it just really, it was the place for me, because this is where I'm really understanding that I am a funny person, and someday I will do stand up, and I'm performing for my friends all the time. All the time.
Wow.
And since it's a small campus, me and my friends would just show up for for a school assembly, and we would do sketches. Nobody asked us to. We would just do it and perform. And so we kind of had like this fan base, and never have to worry about the whole aspect of guys and boys and boy crazy and all that stuff. So being in this all-girls school, again, I didn't know I was a lesbian at the time. It's really allowed me to really focus on my creative side and really understand that I was talented and I did have skills. And someday I was going to really go on stage and perform.
So I have to ask, did your comedy troupe ever make fun of the teachers?
Make fun of the teachers? Not really.
You all were very nice then.
Not really. And also too, I was a big jock. I played basketball, varsity, all 4 years. Thank you very much. And that was fun. Being in athletic teams with women and understanding our strengths, that was a really cool and very empowering time for me as well. Definitely.
You mentioned the Valencia Rose earlier. Before we talk about your journey there, and you summarized basically what it was, but give us a little bit of a deeper sense as to the vibe that it had and the milieu that it was operating in.
Well, the big difference from a straight comedy club and the Valencia Rose was that I got love from the audience at the Valencia Rose. And the only reason I went to the straight clubs in the very beginning, because I didn't know the Valencia Rose existed. So my first stand-up spot is at a straight club, and I'm successful. I'm not the best, but I'm successful.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I know that I'm going to do that again. And about 2 weeks from that point, I read in the paper, the Bay Area Reporter, which was the gay newspaper then. It's still in existence now. I read that there's a little ad that says gay open mic at the Valencia Rose Cabaret. And I think, wow, I got to go there. This is my place. And, but at the same time, I also thought, okay, well, if you go there, then you're going to be known as a lesbian comedian, and that could really stop your career. As if I had a career, I had only performed one time. But I went there, and that was the difference. I walk into the space, and the vibe is, you're welcomed here. Mm-hmm. That was the vibe. And right off the bat, the host, Tom Amiano, just welcomed me, and everybody who worked there, very kind, very nice. And then I could just tell, just looking at the audience, I could just tell, like, wow, this group really, they're invested. They want you to succeed. Whereas the straight clubs, man, those audience members go there to heckle you. They go there to throw trash at you. They don't, it was very violent, really, at the straight clubs, because you never knew what to expect. And then the topics that they would talk about at the straight clubs, oh my goodness, gay bashing was pretty much the main theme of the men. Men would always just straight men would always just say, just horrible AIDS jokes. I don't even know, right? Is that even proper to say, AIDS jokes? And whereas at the Valencia Rose, Tom Amiano said, we have rules here, and so you need to follow these guidelines. And if you don't, then you can't perform here. So I really appreciated that. Right off the bat, before I even got on stage, he said, no hate jokes, nothing queers, you can't, no disabled, no fat jokes. So that was a big difference. And so the vibe was just really, this is your safe space. That was the vibe. And so going on stage for the first time was just amazing. I was so comfortable. I could say that I was a lesbian, where at the straight club, there was no way I was going to announce that I was a lesbian. I didn't feel safe. I feared for my life. But at the Valencia Rose, it was, say whatever you need to say. We're here for you. We'll support you. And, here you can grow. Here you can test out your material and have a good time.
As someone who was young, preparing yourself for a career in stand-up, before you discovered the Valencia Rose, though, how did you develop the fortitude to be able to stand up in front of these audiences that surely you were aware of may have been hostile, if not directly towards the identity that you were presenting to them, but the identity that you might not have been? I've done a very limited amount of stand-up comedy myself. My big problem is that I'm not funny. However, even doing that, I will never forget. I took a comedy class with standing up at Caroline's Comedy Club in Times Square. And as I was telling my quote unquote jokes, being distinctly unhumorous, my right leg was quaking with nervousness. And Monica, I am not a person who lacks in self-confidence. This was a new phenomenon for me. So I can imagine if I was standing up there, just the act of telling jokes was terrifying for me. At least in that environment, I felt safe. I felt, safe because, as a male, it was principally it's a male-dominated field.
Yeah.
I didn't feel as though my racial identity was somehow on the line. And my sexual orientation, I don't remember if I brought up or not, but at the time and place where I was presenting, that open gay bashing or heckling someone purely for being gay was just not acceptable. It just wasn't going to happen. Your situation was totally different. How did you deal with that whole additional level of feeling states that you must have been feeling, having inside?
Here's the thing. Once I did my stand-up comedy routine in high school as a 16-year-old girl, I knew that I was going to go and do stand-up someday, but I didn't know how to go as a 16-year-old girl to a club where you had to be 21 years old. Okay. So during that time, I studied stand-up comics, watching television. And then when I'm like 19-ish, 20, when I figured out how to get a fake ID, I would go to, I had two.
I won't tell anybody.
Please don't. I would go to the comedy clubs and I would sit in the back and I would observe the comics. And I would really just I would sit there for hours. And I would understand okay, he went on stage, he grabbed the mic. Oh, she went on stage, but she didn't touch them. Just really, really observe them. And I would always conclude at the end of the night, I can do that, and I'm funnier. I know I'm funnier. Mm-hmm. So I never went there thinking, oh my God, I'm too young. I can't do this. Never. I went there with okay, how do you do it? What's the best way? Okay, good. Oh, they're not funny. I'm funny. And as I did that, I worked on a 5-minute set that I just did over and over and over and over for myself mostly, and then sometimes for my family, and they were annoyed with it. And I would use, as a microphone, I would use my mom's tortilla rolling pin. So my cultura was always part of my performance. And I was determined because I knew that I was funny. I had a funny family and I knew that I was going to go on stage. So I was, maybe I was being naive, but I was just determined to go on stage. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you my first set was really, very elementary. I did a lot of just television parody, dumb television parody but I also used a lot of sound effects because me and my little brother would always do these sound effects. So that was my first set. My first set wasn't, politics and being affirmative action. No, or feminist. No, it was very playful and silly. And I just had done it for 2 years. I had performed this silly set for me for 2 years. So when I finally got the chance, I was so damned. And I got a decent amount of applause and laughs from people. And so when I walked off stage, it's like, I'm bad. This is cool, man. I'm definitely. And then the guys in the back, all the male comics, there were mostly male comics in the back. They go, "Hey, so you probably been doing this for 6 months?" And I said, "No, tonight's my first time."
Wow.
So I was just super determined. And I wasn't thinking about, hey, somebody could hurt me, or I could walk to the parking lot and get jumped. I wasn't thinking that. Mm-hmm. I was just so determined to do stand-up comedy my way.
You mentioned earlier, vibe in a lot of the straight-dominated clubs was one which, not to beat a dead horse, there was gay bashing going on, but also that there were AIDS jokes being made. Yeah. At the same time, you were, and to be clear for anyone who might be listening, who's not familiar with the time period, at the time the Valencia Rose was at its height. It was during the very early days of the AIDS epidemic. Yes. And at that time, I think, I'll be shocked if you disagree, there was no cure. It was terrifying. Young people were dying gruesome, horrific deaths. No one cared. And they didn't have anyone, except in many cases, those in their own community, to turn to for love, support. There was an atmosphere in the country of fear. There were even some leaders in certain communities that were advocating for concentration camps for people who had AIDS. And you were performing in front of audiences of people that were, at a minimum, being deeply psychologically impacted by this. Give us a sense of how you, as a comedian, handled this and what it was like doing comedy in that environment.
I just, again, this is new. Coming to the Valencia Rose, I'm a fresh comic. And so I'm very eager and I'm very determined to get laughs. And so initially, when I start doing it, I'm not fully aware of how horrific AIDS is. But as I look out in the audience and as I see people as I'm walking to the Valencia Rose, these young men who are in their 20s and they're now using canes to walk because they're dying, that they would come to the Rose, and this was their place. They were like determined to come there. So it gave me even more power to do it. Like I had to do it. I had to do it, despite the sadness. And those guys would come up and say, "Hey, wow, thank you so much for making me laugh," And then maybe I would see him, I don't know, for another month or so, and then you wouldn't see them, and then you would find out, oh, they died. Oh. But like I said, that's when it was just really became important to me to understand the importance of the power that I had as an out lesbian performer on stage, as a Latina out performer on stage, the importance of it, and that I had to do it, whether, I mean, and the amount of AIDS benefits that us comics did, mm-hmm. which I can't even remember how many I did, but wow. That's pretty much at least 1 or 2 a week. We always did it. We never said like, oh no, we can't do it anymore. That was, like, how did I help? I helped out by not charging anybody and would go and do it. And for the most part, I knew that it was for an absolutely great cause. So I did it for the people, really. I mean, that's kind of how you do it, yeah. Despite the sadness of it all. Yeah. You just got to do it.
Yeah. Time went on. That situation faded into the background, although, of course, to this day, it's still not gone. As times changed, as the social positioning of LGBTQ plus people changed, as the expectations around diversity in comedy, although far from complete, began to shift, as different social issues came to the fore, how did your art evolve and change?
Well, it was a big change because I left San Francisco because I was done with San Francisco. I had performed everywhere that I could perform. I had everybody that I could have, and it was time for me to leave. But actually, I really wanted to get into the grad department at NYU. Mm-hmm. I had the degree because I had just gotten my BA from San Francisco State in film. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to get an MFA from NYU. I'm going to go to their film school. And I to New York first because my sister had moved out there and she was living there. And she said, yeah, just come out. You'll get in. And her girlfriend said, yeah, just come out. You'll get in. Don't worry about it. Just come out. So I up and moved and then I applied and then I got rejected.
Oh,
yeah.
Sting.
Yeah, big old sting. Oof, that was harsh. But while I was trying to figure out where I was going to live in New York, because I couldn't stay with my sister and her girlfriend, it's too small, just can't do it. I was having a hard time connecting to New York. This is 86. Mm-hmm. And there weren't any Chicanas like me mm-hmm. Who were there and, who had a San Francisco identity as well. I could not find my people at all. And it was hard. I was trying to work, I didn't do any stand-up comedy. I was too sad and tripped out. I was just trying to look waitressing jobs. And I don't know if you've done any waitering in
I've worked in a restaurant. Yep.
Harsh.
Yeah.
To put it mildly.
Talk to the audience a little bit about that. Not all of them have had that unique experience.
Oh my God. Harsh. And I was struggling. I was dog-paddling. I was like, I'm trying to make New York my place of creativity. Couldn't do it. So once I got that rejection letter, I needed to leave. And I didn't know, do I go back to San Francisco or maybe I should go to LA? I know, I'll go to Los Angeles. Yeah. And then so I contacted my only friend who lives in Los Angeles. And I said, remember how you said that I should be living here because of my career? Can I come tomorrow? Literally, that is exactly what happened. And she said, yes, of course. Yes, you should be here. Yes. And so my sister, because she's a great person, she bought me a one-way ticket and I left New York either the next day or the 2 days later. And I had my brother typewriter in one hand and my suitcase in the other. And I landed in Los Angeles, my beloved state of California. And I kissed the ground because I was happy to be back. It was sun shining. But I was weary because my ego was squished. I had failed. I had never experienced that whole concept of failing. Mm-hmm. And New York was a failing experience. I was a failure. And I got to Los Angeles and I was relieved, but I was very sad and weary and I didn't know what the heck was going to happen next.
And psychological. Oh, go ahead.
But luckily my friend just said, hey, just take it easy. Just stay here. Why don't you just do nothing for a week? And then let's look at stuff. Let's look at stuff. And so that's what pretty much I did.
One of the things that a lot of folks listening to this show are curious about is the ability that our guests have to pull out their inner resilience when facing existential crises of the sort that you're talking about, right? You had been successful in difficult markets in fields that were not traditionally open to folks that had the combination of identities that you had. And you come to New York City with big dreams and it doesn't work out. And, again, not to, beat a dead horse yet again, but New York City can be brutal to those that she chooses to be. And so you were in LA having to restart and deal with this. You took some time off, but where did you find the fortitude to rebuild? I mean, in a way, it has to be, looking back on it, fascinating to think about the fact that you left New York, suddenly just popped up in LA, had experienced this massive failure, and then years later, they're naming entire days after you, right? The mayors of the city are stopping everything they're doing to create a Monica Palacios Day. Talk to us about that journey.
So I get to LA very sad, very broken, but I'm not an amateur comic. I have a solid 5 years under my belt. Yeah, 5 years. And I've already been written about. Scholars have written about my work. I just had to remind myself. That's what it was. It was just like, hey, okay, you can be sad, you can cry, but you're a superstar. Yeah. So that's what I did. I just became my biggest cheerleader. Yeah. And I would just write my little self love notes, put them on the wall, tape them up. I listened to K-Jazz radio a lot. That really, really helped my soul. Yeah. And then I dreaded calling my mom, but I finally, I don't know, a week later, I called her and I go, and I tell her where I am. She goes, "You can't. What are you doing? You can't just move around and say you're going to do this and you don't." And I go, "I know, Mom. I know. Can I borrow $1,000?" And she, she gave me the money, right? If she thought I wasn't gonna pull through, she wouldn't have given me the money. And so I had this little, this little pool of money, and I just kept reminding myself, you're not an amateur comic. You are talented. So why don't you, and this is what I did. I got a hold of queer groups. And I said, are you guys going to have an awards banquet or some type of a public event? Can I come and do 5 minutes of comedy? Do you not have to pay me? I'm just trying to get my name out. I did that. And they said, sure. So, of course, I went. I did 5 minutes of stellar comedy. People loved me. And I got hired for future. That was the plan. And it really worked. It really worked because I went to everybody. I actually used the phone book. Anybody remember the phone book? That big, beautiful yellow phone book?
Don't use words like that. People like me that are only 22 don't know what they mean, Monica.
So I just reached out and I just said, please let me come and do 5 minutes of free stand-up for your crowd.
One of the things that, by the way, is there is an egolessness to it. You're not approaching recreating and reinventing your life from a position of entitlement, but you're totally DIYing your own self-recreation there. And that's something that I think it's important to share with people and for folks to understand. There's no shame in just rolling up your sleeves, putting some meat on the street and saying what you have to whoever you have to in order to make things happen for yourself.
Right. Yeah. I did make a couple of phone calls. I did have my friend who I was living with. I had her pretend to be my agent. I was just using my Hollywood tactics, but still it was me showing up and doing my performance and showing people that, I was a talented queer comic and you should hire me for the future and pay me. And that's exactly what I did. And I still, during this time, I was still very sad. I was still very weary, But each time I did those little performances, it was, I got a little star. I was like, you can do it. Come on. You can do it. You have it in you.
We have a fair amount of entrepreneurs that have appeared on this show and that listen to the show. And you actually just touched on something that I think speaks to a lot of them. And that is the subject of getting paid, specifically getting paid your worth. And when you're saying pay me, it sounds like to me you were at least on some level making sure that you were at least positioning yourself to be able to derive income from this. Were there any psychological barriers you had around that, or was there anything that you had to push through? Were there any challenges moving into, escalating pay? And if so, how'd you deal with those?
As far as learning how to ask for payment of my services, it was just learning. It was all about that. It was all about learning how to do that. I was, when I was performing in San Francisco, I was getting paid. So after in Los Angeles, after like about a solid 6 months of doing things for free, the next person who called me up, they, we want to hire you for 15 minutes. I go, okay, well, that's going to cost you. And that's how it, okay, that's going to cost you. And then they would say, oh, we don't have money, or, okay, we have money. And so it was that whole negotiating thing it's always hard. It's just, that's just how it is. And I think the older I get, I'm better at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it was just learning how to negotiate, learning how to, oh, you can't pay me, but hey, can you wash my car for free for 4 weeks? Just whatever we need. You need to pay me somehow.
Right.
If you don't have the cash, and you need to give me something, a free turkey, or I don't know. I can't be doing this for free.
Right.
So that's how it was.
And that can be a very hard place for folks to get to. Nonetheless, after doing that enough, clearly you moved into a whole host of really interesting, diverse and higher and higher profile projects, and eventually ended up, as I mentioned at the top of the show, being, honored, in 2012, as, having Monica Palacios Day, and, doing another honor in 2017 for your years as a Latinx LGBTQ trailblazer. How did it feel after you'd been through everything that you had gone through to get there to receive these awards?
It felt great. I had worked really hard, and I felt that I deserved it. So, and even getting the Monica Palacios Day, that I had to work for that. I was doing my, it was my 30th year anniversary. Yeah, my 30th year anniversary. And I said, I need a big award from the city. So I started calling the people that I knew. I go, how do I do this? And so I finally found a person who I actually knew from the past. And she goes, oh yeah, we can handle it. We can handle it. What do you want it to say? And this and that. And I go, make it, I wanted to say everything. So make it I want a big long scroll. Mm-hmm. I want it to be unscrolled, and you're going to name all the great things that I've done. They go, okay. Mm-hmm. So really it was me starting it. I deserved it. I deserved to be honored in that way.
And that goes as to an important point for the audience. Actually, 2 important points. A, the power of asking for what you want, not just waiting for it to happen. And then number 2, the power of understanding, really pushing out there the true worth, truly what you deserve.
Yes. Yeah. It was, I for that particular show, the 30th anniversary, I had so much to do. I had too much on my plate, really. I thought I was going to end up at the Betty Ford Clinic, but it was worth it. I had too much to do, but who else was going to do it for me? And who else was going to do it the way I wanted it done? Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I really hustled my ass, but I got it. I got what I wanted. So definitely worth it.
Monica, how can people find out more about you? I will say, I saw your bio, and I'm sure you'll give us your website so that people know where to look it up for themselves. There was so much in there. It was actually difficult for me to narrow down the intro to this. Your resume is unbelievable. It has to be read to be believed. How can people read that resume for themselves so they can just have their jaw hit the floor and pick it up again, as well as engage with you?
Well, you can go to my website, which is monicapalacios.com, or you could follow me on Twitter at Monica P. Flash. You can follow me on Instagram, Mighty Monica Palacios. And if you're the scholar, you can go to academia.edu and get to my page. And I have a lot of, actually, that website, academia.edu, has a lot of my work because it's just really easy to upload as opposed to my website. It's kind of a little difficult, but there's a lot of work on there that I have that people, actually, that's a site where students go and they download my work. I'm also on newplayexchange.org. That's where theater makers go, and they upload their scripts, video clips. And actually, recently I had this student. She found me through newplayexchange.org, and she sent me an email asking me, "Can I please audition with a monologue from your play Clock for the Kennedy Center
Amazing
acting theater festival," something like that.
Wow.
And the great thing about that was she was really once I said yes, she was just really very thankful. She goes, as a Chicana theater major, it's hard for me to find work that represents me, and your work does it all. And so I'm so thankful that you did this for me and for people who are like me, who are like us. So that was really cool. That was recently,
Amazing.
This week.
Amazing. And then there's also a film in which you are prominently featured that has some of that Valencia Rose footage that is, I found myself giggling every time you came on the screen. Tell us about that.
Oh my God. I was so happy to connect with David Pavlovsky, who's the filmmaker, and he happens to be your beau. And he originally just got historical clips of me at the Valencia Rose that I had never seen. I had never seen. Oh, wow. Clips. And then we connected, and then he actually put me in the film. He actually made a special trip to Los Angeles to film me here at my abode. And that was really special. And that's just, generally speaking, that film is just so great. It's so educational and informative and just so special because it has all those guys that were there, Tom Amiano, Karen Ripley, I think Leah Delaire's in it too, myself.
Yeah, I believe so,
Dirk Elfin, who was part of the team at the Valencia Rose. It's just a great documentary. It's just so interesting. And it really captures the spirit of that time. Yeah.
Its name is Stand Up, Stand Out, and it's winning awards. Yes. And you absolutely are one of the highlights of it. Monica, it has been great taking a trip with you down the Purpose Highway. And for everybody who is in the audience, we will see you next time for another drive down the same road. Thank you, Monica.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Join our community today at purposehighway.com and subscribe to get notified when new episodes go live. Scott Mason, checking out.